Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Happy, let's see, it's April. So happy belated Easter. Happy early Mother's Day. I should say good afternoon, good morning, good evening, no matter where you're coming from in the world. And welcome to the next episode of the PixelMail webinar series. And today's offering of measuring the ROI and success of your internet. Turn data into action. As always, my name is Michael Wells. I'm the Customer Success Manager here at PixelMail, and it is my pleasure, my honor, it is all those things to welcome you guys here to join us today. So happy to have you guys. Thanks for coming back. If this is your first time, welcome. Happy to have you here today. You're in for a doozy of a session today. You're gonna have a lot of fun. A couple quick things. We'll go through an agenda real quick. So we're gonna do some introductions, some housekeeping in just a little bit. Then some things we're going to talk about in this session: employee experience and monitoring. We're going to talk about how to define success. We're going to talk about how to choose the right KPIs for success. We're going to see it all in action, which is probably what you're here for. We're going to talk about how to get started with all this, and then we're going to as always, save time for Q&A at the end of the session. Guys, you're in for a fun one today. So just a little bit of housekeeping real quick, as promised. If you have any questions at any time, questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, there is a questions tab. Please throw them on up in there. If you're on the desktop app, it is a little pop-out thing. Drop them in there. If you're on the browser, it should be a little chat bubble with a question mark in it. Throw your questions on up in there. I will be following along. I will get those questions in there as best as possible. I do my best not to interrupt our speakers while they're talking. So I will get those questions in when I can. If we're not able to get to it right in that moment, as I mentioned before, that Q&A at the end, we'll make sure we get that question in there and answered in today's session. So don't worry, your questions will get answered. There is a handout you're going to get at the end of the session. It'll be in the documents panel, excuse me, toward the end of the session. So I'll make sure you guys know when that's up and ready for you guys. And in this session, we do record them all, so this will be up and on YouTube and out for you guys early next week. Because you signed up for this, you will get an email telling you when it's ready to go. So keep an eye out for that. So in case you missed anything, you want to relive it, or maybe you want to spend Friday night with a pizza and a Coke and rewatching the webinar, you'll be able to next week. Don't worry, you'll hear all about it. And there's also a little survey we'll have at the end. Excuse me. It's just an opportunity for you to share your feedback. We are all about constant improvement and making sure we're always putting out the best product possible. So if you have thoughts or anything like that about the presentation, maybe there's a session you would like to see in our webinar series, tell us all about it in that survey, and we'll revisit that again at the end as well. All right, next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about us in case this is your first time ever being on the PixelMail webinar series. In 2022, we joined forces with the good folks at CryoSpark. This did a lot of great things. It helped broaden our expertise, our offerings, our flexibility, and our opportunities. And in the next cycle of our journey to becoming one team, we're extending this unity through a single brand. So what that's going to mean is the PixelMail team is going to continue our pursuit of the ideal digital employee experience as part of the CryoSpark brand. Now, we will soon be recognized as a single brand under CryoSpark, but having said that, the PixelMail name will continue along in the PixelMail webinar series. So you'll still see us, you'll still see that name when it pops up in your email, and rest assured, you'll be working with the same team of empathetic technologists. And you also get to see my beautiful bald bearded face every week. You can still make fun of it, don't worry. But we have so much exciting stuff going on, guys. So having said all that, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really fun 5 years on the webinar series, and we are excited to continue that journey with our new family. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about who we are now. So we've got headquarters in Davis, we've got headquarters in Toronto, and we're still offering that wide range of digital workspace services to help you take your employee experiences to that next level. We're still planning, designing, and developing and maintaining beautiful and expertly architected employee experiences through holistic and humanized digital workspaces, powered by the one, the only, the 365 of them, Microsoft 365. Ruined my own joke there. Good for me. That's a little bit about us. So as we usually do with these sessions, we like to start off with a poll. We like to get an idea of why you guys are here, what you're looking to learn, just hear a little bit more about what is going on here. So I'm gonna launch that real quick. The options are gonna pop up on your screen. Let's take a look at that. How are you measuring success? Your options are out of the box, third-party metrics tool, manually tracking a few things, a yardstick I kept from 3rd grade, or not tracking at all, I need help. Let us know how you're tracking things right now. This has been a hot topic with all my clients that I've been working with, and I'm just excited to finally have this as part of our Rolodex of sessions that we have through the PixelMail webinar series. So Yeah, let us know what you're thinking. I see all these results coming in. Thank you so much, guys. 65% of you have voted. Love to see that. Thank you. Thank you. Give you guys about 10 more seconds to get those answers in there. Very interesting results. Really loving seeing what's coming in here. Excuse me. Great. And 3, 2, and 1. We'll go ahead and close that out, and I will share the results with you guys. Don't worry. Let's see, that should pop up on the screen. 42% of you said out of the box. 8% said third-party metrics tool. 42% said manually tracking a few things, and 8% of you are my best friends, a yardstick I kept from 3rd grade. And nobody's not tracking it at all. That's great. That's actually a really kind of fun thing to happen. I don't think we've ever seen that before. So hey, glad all you guys are at least thinking about how you're tracking everything and looking at how you can improve all of that and how you can measure your success. Let me just go ahead and close that out. All right. So with all that, I've talked enough. I've blabbed on enough. It is time to meet the most important people today who are going to tell us all about how to measure your success. So let's get to some introductions, shall we? Our first person, very familiar face to the webinar series. She is our technical business analyst team lead. She's been in a couple webinars before. Her name, Carolyn Gjerde. Carolyn, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for the introduction, and happy to be here, Michael.
I'll always happy to have you back, Carolyn. Thanks for being here today. And then our next two gents are new to the webinar series, but in true Pixmo webinar series form, we have kept our MVPs. We like to keep them around because they're just so much fun. So we've got a couple new faces for you guys. First, he is a senior strategic consultant at AvePoint. He is the one, the only Microsoft MVP, Norm Young. Norm, how you doing today, my friend?
Hey, I'm great. It's a sunny, little cold day, but it's a sunny day just outside of Toronto in Canada. Really happy to be here to talk about a couple of my favorite topics, SharePoint and analytics.
Love it. We love to hear that. Thanks for joining us today, Norm. So happy to have you. And then second, last, definitely not least, but in alphabetical, I guess not alphabetical order, because I guess Norm would have gone last. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He's still super important. He is also a Microsoft MVP. He's the CTO of tyGraph. He is the one, the only John White. Johnny boy, how you doing today?
I am all sorts of good, Michael. It's good to be here. And like Norm, I'm just outside of Toronto. I'm a little further north, so it's not quite as nice, but the sun is shining, so I'm not going to complain.
We'll take sunshine, man, all day, every day. All right, guys. Well, have some fun. Take it away. Again, guys, if there's any questions that pop up, please throw them up in the chat, and I'll work those in. Take it away, team.
Yeah, I'll just start out a little bit about tyGraph. What tyGraph fundamentally is it's a soup to nuts analytical platform for Microsoft 365. And when I say analytical platform, I mean to distinguish that from straight up reporting platforms. And to do that, you've got to get right down into the weeds with your data. It was originally founded, I've been in this business way too long, but I'm one of the co-founders of the company. And it was originally founded because there was a strong demand to get more analytics data out of all things Yammer. It was we started out by doing Yammer back in the day, and the out-of-the-box stuff just wasn't cutting it. And we had a look. We had extensive experience in business intelligence, and we thought we could build a product out of this. Turns out we did. So anyway, can we move along there, Karen?
Yeah.
I should just say okay.
Over
to you.
Yeah, so we have a couple of quotes. Why are we here today? I'm going to read these in reverse. So the first one, if you're struggling with high staff turnover, it's time to create an effective employee retention program that addresses the reasons good staff are leaving. The internet's an ideal place to start. Why? It's one tool that can be used to address the main reasons employees leave: lack of communication, bad culture, burnout, and inflexibility. Well, how can we do some of this stuff? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So that's kind of like the theme of today. So why measuring, why metrics are so important. And we're also going to talk a little bit about employee experience and monitoring. So first, what is employee experience? The employee experience is an employee's beliefs about the events that occur during their professional existence as a member of an organization. What they think, feel, observe, and encounter comprises the employee experience. And then why monitoring is important. Measuring employee experience is arguably one of the most important metrics for your organization's success. These metrics help you get the pulse of your team sentiment. And then perception is reality. So understanding how the team views their experience with the organization is vital. Keeping a pulse on this through metrics brings awareness to issues and allows you to address them before they snowball. So first, how are we going to do this? How are we going to define success? We're picturing this as several different groups of people in the organization. It's not just going to be coming from one group. So this first group is probably the group that you're thinking of, the digital workspace owners, and they're going to be focused on content consumption. For the digital workspace owner or a site owner, what's important to track is what content's being consumed, how team members are really using that content, how many times stories are being viewed and by what types of team members, what content isn't being viewed. Is that content still relevant? Is it 5 years old and needs to be removed? And looking at page views to see what's not getting hit. And also the percentage of team members that are consuming the content. Is only 20% of the organization looking at certain things when you really are looking to get a global message out. Another group that really should be interested in measuring things on your environment is HR and operations. For these groups, content messaging. If you look to uncover what content isn't reaching certain groups, or types of team members to better understand challenges of content access. Maybe you have a whole group of people that just have a difficult time accessing the intranet, and you have to figure out how to get them content in different ways. Do certain regions or locations access specific content? Another really interesting way to view content is through collaboration insights, where you can track sites and content that's shared across different teams, departments, and regions, and really get a pulse on how the organization is working with and collaborating. Another one is retention. Is there a correlation between any groups experiencing increase in leaving the organization and the intranet use? Is there any way to kind of track that? And then the third group that another kind of way to look at who should be tracking and different types of things that they might be tracking is IT team. Security tracking, if you're tracking external guest activity, if your tenant allows it, external file sharing, making sure the right information is things that you are allowing them to share are being shared out, and things that you want to keep internal to make sure those types of documents aren't going out. You can track sensitivity label content as well. Another thing to be able to track is around data protection, to track what information is being shared or obfuscated, or around the intranet health, about how much storage is used over time. And again, content management, that the IT team might be more tasked around tracking inactive content throughout the tenant. So when we think of these different groups and the reasons why that sharing is important, so how do we go about choosing the right KPIs for success? So one of the things is what to track to prove the success or ROI of your digital workspace. One, I think, is to decide how to measure your analytics. Do you want to go with out of the box or choose a third-party tool? How can you track user adoption? Maybe one of the first things to track is what percentage of team members are using the intranet. And then also to identify those top intranet users, because once you have those people identified, you can kind of solicit feedback from these heavy users to see what's resonating, what's working well, what challenges they face. And another thing is to track how the intranet aligns with key organizational objectives. So the intranet goals really should be aligning with those major key organizational goals. And when you can kind of have some synergy between the two, the intranet becomes one of your best drivers of these organizational initiatives. And another thing to think about is what to track to make data-driven, actionable change. And you can look to employee satisfaction around that. So if you are doing employee surveys, to kind of get the overall sense of how the team is feeling, or on retention rate to kind of pull out things if you're doing exit surveys. You can use the information from these tools to create content and experiences that address these strengths and weaknesses. And a feedback loop is really key to kind of track the effectiveness of changes over time. So using both the data that you see from the analytics, as well as speaking to your team members to kind of make these changes over time. And then what to track to understand how the team is working. Track files being shared between departments. You can use that to uncover interconnected ways team members are working across the organization. Also track what types of content's being shared externally. What types of things, are there any patterns of information that's being shared with different people that are not employees? And then look to survey responses around how engaged the team members are feeling. And then this final slide, it's a little bit difficult to read, but we've kind of broken down these kind of major categories on what you can do out of the box, what a third-party tool like tyGraph is really good about showing you. So you can see out of the box, you can hit these base metrics, but obviously with tyGraph you can do a bit more. And with this, I'm going to turn this over to John to kind of give an overview of out-of-the-box SharePoint reporting options.
Yeah, I pulled the short list there. I've fewer checkpoints to go through, so I'll try not to take too terribly long. One of the things that can be tricky in doing this is figuring out exactly what signals to measure and gather up that data. Well, Microsoft has figured out what some common metrics are that they figure everyone is going to be interested in measuring, and they've put them into this administration portal. And as you might expect with Microsoft, everything's kind of around the workload. So you can see, it's a little blurry, but on the left-hand side of the screen up there, you have a number of workloads like Exchange, like SharePoint, like Teams, etc. And then you've got some metrics specific to each one of these workloads that's tracked in a number of charts that you can visually see. This is over a 30-day period, and then broken down by one particular dimension. In this case, it's employees. And so what you'd be looking at here is, in the case of SharePoint, how many files they viewed over this 30-day period that's selected. In this case, it's the past 30 days. You can see when the last activity date was, and a number of other metrics like what pages they viewed, etc., and how many users actually overall were active in the system. That's in one of those little charts. And you can see how that fluctuates on a day-by-day basis. Now, this is located within the administration UI within Microsoft 365. That means you have to have access to the administration UI, and not everyone does. In addition to that, you also have to have been granted the reporting role in the portal. So an administrator, a tenant owner is going to have to grant you that access. And that may not always be an easy thing to get, let's put it that way. Okay. If we could get the next, yeah, right, excellent. Now, I mentioned what we were looking at was for a 30-day period. You don't have to restrict yourself to that 30-day period. You can do it in 4 different groups. 7 days, as you can see on the screen, 30 days, 90 days, and 180 days. What happens to your data after 180 days? It is deleted. It's not available to you. Microsoft can only keep so much data per tenant, and this is pre-aggregated data to start with, but they're not going to keep it around any longer than they have to. So after 180 days, that is gone. Now, when you're looking at that information, you're seeing, say, number of documents consumed by a user in 30 days or in 7 days. What if I want to see it on a day-by-day basis? You can look at that in the charts in the portal, but you can't get that in that detailed table down below. You can export that table, but it's going to maintain the aggregation that you have selected. So again, over that specific time frame. All right. You have to turn this. Actually, you don't have to turn this on. What you have to do is to determine whether or not you get to see what you might consider as sensitive information. And sensitive information in this world are user emails and names, and also site names when it comes to SharePoint. And if you want to see those options, you have to check this option, which is basically display concealed user, group, and site names in all reports. If you do not check this, you are going to see GUIDs. Now, you're going to have things aggregated by GUID, so you'll have an indication that for a site you had 50 hits and for a different site you had 3 hits, but you're not going to know which site is which. So I'm going to leave it to you to determine how useful that information is if you turn this, if you don't turn this switch on. But let's just say we recommend that customers turn the switch on. Now, it's just one more, Carolyn. Sorry. No problem. So again, we have to have access to the admin portal, and we have to have that reporting role. What if I want people to see this information, but I don't want to grant them that level of access to the system? We can use this Power BI app, but and we'll get to that on the next slide. But to use that, we also have to turn on the bottom option, which is make the report data available to the Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics for Power BI app. Okay. And the app looks something like this. I don't know how many people on the call have used Power BI before, but a Power BI app is a distributable Power BI workspace. I'm not going to go and explain what all that is, but it's essentially it's a set of reports, a user interface with a number of reports in it that is connected to that data. The very same data that's powering the portal is behind this. And as an admin, you can create this thing and then distribute it out to your organization through an app. And you are not restricted to that portal requirement if you do that. Now, Power BI is a very, very powerful analytics tool. In fact, Power BI is one of the front ends that tyGraph uses and relies on to interact with data models. The difference here is that we're working against the pre-aggregated data, the same pre-aggregated data that admin portal uses. So for the past 30 days, we can get down to a day level of granularity, and we can look at some of these pre-baked reports. It's not so easy to make changes to them, but it's a little more flexible in how you can drill around. But you are still kind of constrained to workload by workload, and the dimensions and the measures, the pivot points that Microsoft thinks you're interested in, like number of sites, but you don't get things like number of subsites, and you can't filter down, say, how many sites did this user use, right? You can't get any more complicated really than one level of hierarchy at the dimension level. But it does have the benefit, if you're using Power BI already, that you can distribute it out to a larger swath of your organization. Okay. Now, if we want to get a little bit deeper than that, we can get into the reporting APIs. And if you'll notice, I'm kind of going a little bit in the order of increasing complexity with out of the box. So with an API, as you might expect, you're probably going to have to do a little bit of coding. There are a number of endpoints you can call, and when you call these endpoints, it's going to return a CSV file. And the contents of the CSV files look something like what I have up here on the screen. Most of these, each one, there's an endpoint for almost every important dimension for every workload. You're going to call into it and say, I want this, and you're going to give it a time period. So I want the 7-day aggregation. I want the 30-day aggregation. You're getting a sense of the aggregation period you have here. You can ask for a specific day level of aggregation, but you can only do that for the past 30 days. Beyond that, you can only ask for month levels at the most granular. When you get a day level of granularity, as you can see at the bottom, your list is shorter, or potentially shorter. It's shorter because that day level of aggregation does not include elements that have had no activity whatsoever. So you can see above, it's essentially the same call above and below, but they're calling different time periods. And the top one, you can see items that had, in this case, it was looking for user activity in Teams. And the top side has 0 activity for a number of users, and those users just do not appear in the bottom option. So yep, I think I've covered this one. So let's move on to the next one. What I've already talked about the day period. The same thing is true for those time periods for the API. And like I said, you can't get you can get day level granularity only for the past 30 days. One other thing you should be aware of when you're working with these APIs, this is also true of the portal, by the way, it's just a little less visible, is the latency involved in that data becoming available. If you expect to be able to go into your SharePoint site, click around a few times, and then go into the API and pull the information down and see the effect of your clicking around a little bit, you're going to be disappointed. It's aggregated up daily. When during the day does it get aggregated up? That's a good question. If I figure out the answer someday, I'll let you know. But depending on the workload, it can take 1, 2, or 7 days. Okay, it just totally depends on the endpoint, and you're never 100% sure when that's going to appear, but it should appear at some point in time. Okay. Now, what we've been talking about is pre-aggregated data up until now, right? This is data that, again, Microsoft has gone out and collected it from a number of sources and basically provided you with an aggregate table that you can report against. What if that's not good enough, right? I want to know the interactivity between a specific individual and a piece of content. Well, I'm going to need to know 2 things really, and that aggregation covers both of these to some degree. But I'm going to need to know what I have, and I'm going to need to know what I did, or what my organization has and what my organization did. So one piece of those 2 puzzles is covered off by the audit log. The audit log is in your tenant, needs to be turned on, and it will track everything everyone does for some time. We'll get into what those time periods are, and you can search it. So across every workload has a number of activities that you can query for, and you can see the screen here. It's under the Purview brand now. So if you go into the Purview console, I guess, the Purview portal, you can go search this. You basically specify a time range you want to search for, what activities you want to search for. In this case, you're looking at a file was checked in SharePoint. You can restrict that to a number of sites, and then you can hit go. Okay, and Carolyn, sorry to keep calling. Yeah, when you hit go, you're going to get a series of results, and you can see how granular these are. Right, you've got the day and the time. You got the IP address of where people were calling in from. I didn't obfuscate our names, so there's already a bunch of old email addresses for all of us. What that activity was, what the item itself was. So you can see in the top case, it was a page, and you can see where it came from. And there's a level of detail that's beyond just what shows up on this screen that you can also ask. And the metadata that appears is going to depend to some degree on the workload that was being accessed. And the activity being requested. So you can call that, you can go into the compliance.microsoft.com, go into audit log search, try it yourself, all right? But again, this is the kind of granularity that you're gonna need if you need to do advanced analytics, and this is available through the audit log. Okay, Carolyn? So I mentioned that was the audit, the Purview UI. So if you've got an ad hoc query you wanna make, but what if you wanna do something systematically? Well, you can call the management API. There is an API that you can call to get this information. Hold on to your hats, be ready to receive a large amount of data or store a large amount of data, but it's there. A subset of this data is also available through Azure Sentinel. Data around SharePoint, Exchange, Active Directory, and Teams, I believe, can all be streamed into Azure, the Azure Sentinel. So that stuff can be available through one of the containers that Sentinel provides you with. Again, it's querying, but you can get into a little more granular database type querying through the use of Sentinel. Okay. How long do we have data for? That's what I was getting at. We can keep data for a period of time. What is that period of time? Well, let's start out with it's 0 days if you don't turn it on. So you have to turn on the audit log within your tenant. As I mentioned, it has detailed transactions. For E5 users, you by default get 1 year of retention for these 4 workloads: SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, and Azure Active Directory. Okay. If it's E3, it's 90 days by default. All right. And for E5 and E5 organizations, it's also 90 days by default. You can go into your tenant and set an organization policy to increase it to 1 year for all other workloads if you have E5, right? Not for E3. If you want to take it up even further and have Microsoft hold on to your data for a total of 10 years, again for those 4 specific workloads, you can purchase an add-on purview license, and that's a per user add-on. And it will retain the data for those users for up to 10 years. Okay, so those are your retention options with the audit log. And then finally, if you're working with that API that I was talking about, it doesn't matter how much data Microsoft has, they're only going to return 6+ days of data through the API for you. So if you've got an API and you're pulling data out like we do and need to retain it for periods of time, you really don't want to miss any more than 6 days of data. You're going to begin to get data gaps. All right. That was activity. If you need inventory, if you need to know what you have, there is a technology called Microsoft Graph Data Connect. Today it is limited. It is primarily aimed at Exchange content, but it has some SharePoint content in there now, and that content is increasing over time. But if you wanted to retrieve email, calendar entries, contacts, you can see the list on the left-hand side. You can use Graph Data Connect. And what Graph Data Connect is fundamentally is a connector for Azure Data Factory. And Azure Data Factory is Microsoft's ETL tool in the cloud, right? If you're using Azure and you're moving data around, chances are you're using Azure Data Factory today. You plug in Azure Graph Data Connect, and it will go get that information for you, and it will process it, and it will land that data as JSON files in a storage account of some sort or another, whether it's Azure Blob Storage, Data Lake, likely not that anymore. We've pretty much standard on Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. There is a cost for working with this, 75 cents per 1,000 rows of data, but it can do this kind of in an offline fashion, so you're not having to pound on the graph endpoint, which is how you would otherwise go and get your inventory data. But that's kind of what your options are out of the box. As I mentioned, increasing complexity. We're landing on this thing that basically gives you JSON files. You're going to have to go build your reporting solution around that, but it is all available to you should you need it. And with that, I think that's all of the out of the box sections I was going to talk about today. We're going to hand it off to Norm, who's going to show you. Well, again, we built the product because we didn't think the out of the box options were good enough. So Norm's going to show you what we do.
Thank you, John. That is, it's very interesting when we review all of the information and data that's available to us, and you're part of the presentation. No one can ever say that we are data starved. It's quite the opposite. We are overwhelmed with data. But where the opportunity is, and when we go back to what Carolyn was talking about with the real needs of the business users, the organizations that are trying to inform that decision making, taking that data, using those different tools and opportunities that you highlighted, John, combining them with the business requirements that Carolyn outlined, we can have a solution that can deliver information. And hopefully that information can lead into insights for organizations. And that's what we strive to do at tyGraph. Around the SharePoint space, we have a number of offerings that help to not only show the inventory and the activity of the SharePoint sites in the organization, but we can also start to understand user behaviors. And this is really important. It's not about the platform SharePoint. We get great reporting from Microsoft out of the box on that front. We can see how many users are using SharePoint. But a group like HR, a group like communications, they might be using SharePoint as a platform, but their real investment is communicating knowledge, building up knowledge repositories throughout the organization, and measuring that engagement and that activity is so crucial that you don't get in some of the out-of-the-box offerings. And so I want to demo a couple things today to showcase kind of the art of the possible, something that we've been building over the course of years, like John mentioned, and really maturing. And I'm going to show first something called tyGraph Pages. This is a Power BI reporting solution that also has web parts that I'll show near the end. This is solely focused on how your users are engaging with your pages, like your intranet pages and your news articles. And when we land on tyGraph pages, we get this content overview screen. And what you get is this strategic view of everything in your tenant. I can see the total volume of sites. I can see the number of users. I can see the number of page views that they've taken. So I'm starting to get some data points here. And now I can start to glean some insights. Here's an example of what I mean. I can see the peak time of all of my users in the organization plotted down. This is very insightful. Now I know when my users are most likely to be online. Should I start to post new content? The same true can be said for the time of day, or the day of the week, excuse me. I can see that peak activity. I can find those areas of high activity and low activity and curtail my news announcements and my other posts to kind of fall into that area. And it's really nice to know that you have a certain baseline of activity inside of your organization. But context tends to be everything. And so while we know we have 65 sites and 19 users, I want to know more about them. Where are they coming from in the world? I'm in a multinational corporation. It's important to me to know that my content is resonating with different parts of the world. So I can view that viewer breakdown by their usage location. I can look at the country. If the state was populated, I could see that. I could look at the city and drill down to get to a point where I can see users and how they've engaged. Hopefully you're thinking to yourself, like, that doesn't look like a user, that looks like a GUID. And you're right. So Carolyn mentioned obfuscation earlier. And what we're really talking about is data protection. So in this case, with this report, with the options we have in tyGraph, we can protect that data. And so now you're not seeing a user's email address, which might be sensitive for some organizations. You're seeing obfuscated or data protection applied value that does not reveal anything about the person except they're from New York and they're from the United States. I may want to understand where they are in the organization. Are they a part of a particular department? If so, are they in a certain job code? And this helps us understand who our people are in the organizations. So we're starting to build up context to these data points that we talked about. And that context will help flip data into information. And if I need something very operational, I just need a listing, we can get that out of tyGraph as well. And as we look at the strategic view of everything inside of our SharePoint intranet or our tenant, we'll always want to focus down to that tactical level. Power BI has this great feature, dynamic cross-filtering. We probably take it for granted, we use it so often. I can select an entry or a site that I'm interested in, and the rest of the report changes. My viewership changes, the views change, everything changes to match. Really handy for being able to remove the noise and focus on the sites that matter the most to me. And with data, we want to slice, we want to dice, we want to drill down. And so here's how easy it is to drill down into a site. I can click in, and now I can have a greater understanding of my site audience. I can see again where they're coming from in the world. I can see what pages they're attracted to within the site. I can even see the attractiveness of content created by different page authors. Heck, we can even see the type of platforms that they're using. So now I'm really starting to get a better idea of what's happening in the site, where it's happening in the world, and what they're being attracted to. One of the great things in tyGraph is that you have the option, and it's a great feature in Power BI, I should say as well, is that you have flexibility and you have the options to modify what you see on the screen to suit your analytic needs. So in this case, this measure over time is looking at unique page viewers by date. I can simply change that to look at average session duration. So now I'm understanding, are my users in this site for longer periods over time? Now we're starting to get into some behavior analytics. Let me click back. Let's come out of that tactical and let's get granular. I'm going to focus on a site, or page, excuse me. This page has an associated performance that we can measure. I can see the number of page viewers. I can see the page views. I can see the peak time that it was used. Here's something that's really interesting. Now I can understand how long, on average, our users are spending on the page. This is pretty insightful. If I'm spending a second on a page and bouncing off to something else, there really wasn't that much engaging content on that page. If I'm spending like 7 minutes and 43 seconds on a page, there's something that's worth engaging with. This is huge for knowledge retention. This is huge for the employee experience to make sure that we're putting the right content in front of the right people at the right time. For our IT friends, we can even see how long the page took to load. And we'll look more at technical performance for our IT friends in a little bit. But here's where it gets really exciting. Inside of standard web analytics, people are always trying to understand the user journey. And we really haven't had a benefit of that inside of SharePoint. But with tyGraph pages, we can now start to understand that user journey. We can see that on this page, there are 21 referring URLs. Well, what does that mean? Well, those are the URLs that brought the user to this page. Let me say that again. These are the URLs that brought the user to this page. So I can see that 7 unique viewers came to this page 12 times from the root URL of the site. So conceivably, there must have been a link or a button or something in the global navigation or site navigation that pushed the users to this site. And it was probably a good choice for the information architecture, considering how long they spent on the page, how many people are coming there. We can also see where they were clicking off to the destination links. So this is the other half of the user journey. We can see that some of them returned back to the root URL, others went to the information technology site. So now you're starting to understand how people flow in and flow out of your pages. Really insightful user behaviors that we can unearth in pages. Now, what about how people interact with the page? So we have something called click area. So we can see, as an example, that on this page, people were interacting with a web part called In Focus. And within In Focus, it had a number of links that it was sharing. So I can see the number of users and the times that they were clicking on those web part elements. That's pretty exciting. Now, if you had invested in third-party web parts or you wanted to know the effectiveness of your first-party web parts that you're using, looking at click traffic, click areas can help you rationalize if that investment makes sense. So we're at this very operational level now, but let's come out. Let's come down to our content health. One of the things that Carolyn said is sometimes you have content that goes stale, stuff that hasn't been used. You know, maybe for short-lived content like a news article, that's fine. But what if it was real knowledge information that could be confusing search results, or worse yet, providing the wrong information to users? So we can view all of the content in tyGraph pages based on last activity. I can go find those pages that haven't been touched in 90 days, 180 days, or even greater as we collect this activity data, and sometimes take action if it's warranted. Also with that is that we can target pages that we consider are slow. And when I'm talking about a slow page, I'm talking about that technical, that load time from the user's browser session till completion. And so we can drill into that technical performance and look at the individual users and their sessions and how long it took to load the page. In this example, we can see 3 users came into our page. and we can see their page load durations. Now, this number is not reported from SharePoint. This number is reported from the user's browser, captured by the tyGraph Pages data collector. We can see one user took over 17 seconds to load a page. That's really slow. That's not the best user experience. We can see another user just over 5 seconds. That's a slow page by modern standards. And we can see one user who's loading at 1.5 seconds. I can see that distribution of where they are in the world. So I'm getting a lot of context. So if I'm in IT and I'm having one of my users say that SharePoint crashed, SharePoint won't load, SharePoint is always slow, this will give you the ammunition to understand what's really happening. Is it a user in a bandwidth constrained part of the world, or is there something legit happening on this page? And then we can see it plotted over time. As an example, we could say, yes, there was a few slow users, but maybe we made a change, and then we can plot that trend over time to know if the change we made, maybe to remove a data-driven web part or a very large image, affects that page performance. And so we can see that inside of tyGraph Pages. Pretty cool. Beyond adopting the platform of SharePoint, we want to make sure that users are adopting our intranets and our key knowledge sites. So the adoption overview screen gives us some really good insights. Things like our session duration. How long are people going from site to site to site, to page to page to page, to do their work inside of the intranet? Tracking that will help us understand if our users are establishing a baseline of activity or increasing their appetite for information from SharePoint. Time on page across all of our active sites and pages. Are they, again, engaging for longer periods of time, getting what they need? Or are they coming out very quickly? And we can do things like establishing a monthly active usage trend. And with that MAU score, we can start to see, sorry, let me pivot that, there we go. We can start to establish a baseline, and we can know if month to month we're performing the way we expect, excuse me. We also have something called the weekly active usage that can tell us if we're trending towards the right MAU score, and even a daily active usage. And what's great about the adoption overview screen is that, yes, you get those high-level KPIs, but you also understand where your consumption is happening in the world, what platforms and devices are being used, and even where the concentration of activity is happening in the sites. Really informative and powerful information for your intranet owners, your site owners, and others in the organization to know how SharePoint, your intranet, and your key sites are performing. One of my favorite features in tyGraph Pages is called search activity. And I'm not talking about Office 365 search. I'm talking about that search box that exists in SharePoint. I'm not talking about team search. I'm not talking about any other search in Office 365 except for SharePoint search. So for SharePoint search, we are getting search data. It's amazing. I can see the number of searches that are being executed. I can see the number that had no results. I can see the number of users searching. I can see what site they're coming from. So I can focus in on a particular site. In this case, it's called B2C. There are 43 searches. 2 users were searching. 9 of those 43 searches had no results. That's not good. I can see where they're coming from in the world. I can see where they're coming from in the organization, by department, by job description or job title, excuse me. I can even see what they're searching for. I can look at those search queries from this site, and in this example, we'll hone in on governance, and we can see that governance was a popular search. It was searched for 10 times. It had 3 click-throughs. So the click-throughs are the results that the search came back with. I can see that in governance, they were clicking through to corporate governance, governance and reporting, and supplier governance. Now, if I'm making decisions around my global navigation, hub navigation, site navigation, or other types of information architecture decisions, this is the right tool to help inform some of those decisions. If I have people searching for something time and time again, that's time to consider moving that into an area of prominence within the intranet so they don't have to search for it. And this is how, to Carolyn's point, we start to improve the user experience inside the intranet. The employee experience is not just about a single app. It's about bringing what's important to the employees to the forefront. And this is one of those ways you can optimize that. Next thing that we have, metadata engagement. And for my SharePoint friends on the call, you know what metadata is. We're talking about the metadata term store tags. For others who may not be intimate with it, we're just talking about bits of information that will associate to content, like a page or a news article. For example, we could say, let's look at anything to do with analytics. So instead of searching for a site or a page, we can search for this metadata that unifies all of this content together. So now I can see who's reading analytics-based content. What pages are they visiting that are associated with that analytics tag? I can even understand how much time they're spending on the page. Really insightful, really cool. So there's something else that you've probably seen on the screen. It says page views by scroll percentage. That's right. We can look at how far down a user is scrolling on a page with our data collector. Now, if you have a very large monitor and all of the content fits, that's 100% scroll. And that's why you see that big spike on that graph. For the other form factors or screen resolutions, you can start to see that scroll percentage. Now, why is that important? Well, not all content can be consumed in like a short amount of time. We hear a lot about page views. And page views are an important count to show how often someone's coming to a page. But that doesn't speak to the consumption of information. That does not speak to how people are engaging. So what we've done at tyGraph is we've come up with this calculation, and it's called a verified unique reader. And what we're doing is we're tracking how long a user spends on that page, and then comparing it to the scroll percentage that they may have had to say, in this case, if they spent 30 seconds on my page and they scrolled through at least half the content, we'll consider that as a verified reader. They read the content. That's good, that's insightful, but what if it was like a really important message from the senior leadership in your company, and it was so important that you needed everyone to scroll down to at least 80%, and it's not possible for them to speed read through that content in any less than a minute. Well, then you have that ability to control what readership looks like for your pages and for the items that you're doing analytics on. This is really, we go beyond data. We move into the realm of information, then into insights when we're using this advanced analytics tool that we have with tyGraph pages. And to date, to this point, we've just been talking about pages and news articles, and those are very important to the intranet and SharePoint, but there's also files, of course. And to look at the file side of the story, we come into something called tyGraph for SharePoint. And this reporting solution has dozens, if not hundreds, of visuals that speak to the different perspectives and analytic questions you might take around files. But this one I want to showcase. And this is called the collaboration scorecard. I can quickly see all of my top sites by the users who are collaborating in them. And then I can view that from the perspective of geography. So I have the what, I have the where, and now I have the who. I can use this drop-down menu box where I can change user-based attributes to suit my need. I could use country, I could use job title, I could use department, and we'll use department as an example. So I can see where this work is happening inside of the world based on there. Now, let's take it a step further. Let's get granular. what was the information systems department working against for sites? And I can see that they were in the QA training site and they were working on a number of notebooks, and I can see their collaboration over time. And I can even get in to understand who my top content creators and consumers have been. And the one area that I really like to show, and it's called this collaboration network, and I'm going to explode this into focus mode. And I hope you're saying to yourself, what is this sea creature? And you're right, this looks like it belongs at the bottom of the ocean. But this is a wonderful data exploration tool, because you can see, without having any data analysis background, that there are clusters of activity. And remember, we're looking at departments and files. You can also see outliers. Look at these outliers. These people, this quality and compliance department, they're working on one file and they're not working with the rest of the organization. Is that collaboration? They're using collaboration tools, but I'm going to argue that that is not collaboration. Let's zoom out and let's take a closer look at one of these larger clusters. I'm looking at the data sciences department. They've got a lot going on, but let's follow something here. Let's follow this big, thick, bold line. And what is it extending out to? It's going into another OneNote. Okay, that's interesting. They're working on a OneNote. Seems like other departments are doing that as well. But you may notice these other lines, these points of intersection. If I zoom out just a bit and I start following that down, I can see that data sciences is collaborating with the manufacturing department in San Diego on that OneNote and these other files where there's points of intersection. I can also see that research and development is also contributing to that knowledge management. That's collaboration in files visualized, and this is such a powerful experience. We collaborate in meetings, we collaborate in chat, but this is how an organization collaborates inside of files. I want to come back to tyGraph pages, but I want to show it to you in a different form factor. I'm going to show it to you in a web part that we've created. The web part is not intended to compete with the Power BI report. It's intended for a different use case. The use case being site owners, in context analytics, in context of SharePoint, and we can see a lot of those key metrics, page views, unique viewers, the top pages in comparison, the top news. Shoot, I can even see the top links. I get these wonderful KPIs to let me know simply if I'm trending up or down during the last time range. And I can flip from hub site to site analytics, and this will be in context where I'm working or viewing this information. We'll give this a second to render. When you share your desktop, these things always happen like this. So I can look at page views, I can understand unique users, all of similar information that we saw in the other areas, but we have the option to pivot from site analytics, and then I can focus my analysis in the web parts to navigation. Who's using the site navigation and what links are being clicked on the most? Who's using the hub site navigation and what sites are being clicked on the most? If we had global navigation hooked up in this site, we would see that as well. I can flip down to device usage. And this is becoming important. Yes, we're all working on different types of devices. They all tend to be a desktop, a laptop, but with things like Viva connections coming to the fore, people are not always coming in through a browser. It could be on a mobile device. So understanding the platforms, like the operating system, the browsers that are being used, even the screen resolutions to help inform page ergonomics, browser sizes, client types, will help inform your decisions around who your audience is and how you customize and customize your content for delivery. We also have some insights into Viva Connections. Viva Connections is a really nice way for people to stay inside of the context of, or the working inside of Microsoft Teams to get access to that intranet information. So we can understand the number of users that are using Viva connections. It's pretty low, unfortunately, in this tenant. And we can see the numbers that are coming in with the traditional browser approach. But Viva connections is part of our everyday talk now in the SharePoint world. So it's great to see that. And it's easy to flip this around. And we do have some customization options. But this is where it gets really cool. I'm going to click on the report bar. And you'll notice across the top, I get these options. And what I want to show you, the thing that I just think is so awesome for our friends who are not in IT or data analytics experts, is the link reporting. I've clicked on the link reporting. Now I'm going to hover over a link. And you're probably seeing it highlights red. I can see the number of clicks that have happened. I can see the trend that it's happened in. So I can, just as a simple user, show some empathy towards your friends in marketing communications who don't want to get into the business of all this. They can just move their mouse around and understand how things are working. It can also use a heat map, and we can see how all of the areas that have got the highest concentration of clicks start to show up with a darker burgundy color, and then they fade out to the lighter colors of yellow to show the least amount of traffic. So there's a lot that I've shown in this short amount of time in between the tyGraph Pages reports, the SharePoint report, and the web parts. And the idea here is to understand how engagement looks. It's to understand how your users behave. It's to measure the performance of that investment that you made inside of your SharePoint intranet. And hopefully, you can start informing decisions around your information architecture and your site and your page design. I think I've probably used up too much time, Michael, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, sir.
No worries. Glad. Oh man, so much to cover. It was good to go through all that. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. Real quick question that came in. What are you doing with the metrics to assure that they are counting the same thing when the metrics are just a number on the axis? I like to use red, amber, green as much as possible so the management can be proactive.
Oh, of course. So having the visual indicators to understand if something needs your attention or not. You do find that in some of our Power BI solutions, but one of the things that you get with Power BI is the ability to export the underlying report into like a PDF or to a PowerPoint to customize as you see fit. Also, you can export the data. The truth is, you're probably never going to take something like tyGraph Pages and give it to a C-level user. You're going to select a certain visual that makes sense to you. You're probably going to pull out the data into Excel, and then you're going to make it match your corporate branding. We see that time and time again with our tyGraph customers. Great question.
A really great question. Thank you all. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, that was the only question. Wonderful. Okay, just want to make sure that was there. Excellent. I don't think this slide is me. Is this?
Yeah, no, this is just what to start tracking today. Instead of going over,
gotcha.
we're short, but just the important thing is start tracking, no matter, what method you use. The important thing is to start collecting your data. But now we can pass it back over to you, Michael.
Turned myself off. My apologies. There we go. Always somebody. Usually that somebody's me. I'm going to be dropping a handout in the handout tab in just a moment for you guys. Full of a bunch of tasty resources for you based on everything we've talked about today. Definitely check that out. Definitely grab that. And exclusive for you all who are here today in these sessions. So thank you for being here. Use those resources as you can. So we mentioned the survey before the beginning. We're coming back to it right now. This is your opportunity. Give us a little feedback about how the webinar went, what you think, what you'd like to see more of. If you have any comments, concerns, all that stuff, let us know. Follow the link, follow the QR code, however you want to do it. When you do that, it does enter you into the opportunity to win a $50 Amazon gift card. Something we've been doing for a while. We love to do it. We love to encourage getting feedback on our webinar series. So please do. I encourage you to do that. Speaking of which, we got to do it from last month. So here's our handy dandy little chooser thing. Put it up here so I can't see who it is. All right, we got a winner. Winner from last month is going to be Julie Giantoli. Julie Giantoli, you are the winner from last month's webinar survey giveaway. Congrats. I'll be reaching out to you later today or tomorrow to get that going. So congrats. Hey guys, that could be you. A winner could be you next time we do this. So please fill out the survey and all that fun stuff. So with that, we are a few minutes over. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around with us. Norm, John, Carolyn, thank you so much for an amazing session. I've been looking forward to this one for months, and I'm so happy that we got to finally have you guys on here talking about everything that tyGraph has to offer and all this stuff. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Everyone is still around. Thank you so much for joining us. Always happy to have you here as our friends of the Pixel webinar series. Stay safe. Stay happy out there, and we will see you all down the road. We'll see you next month. We've got some sessions coming up about Viva. More information coming out soon. Now I can finally say goodbye. See you all down the road, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.